So if you want to install Azure Stack HCI with a proxy, then this video is for you. So installing Azure Stack HCI is a complex thing, right? It requires quite some steps, which I would advise you to read carefully the official documentation for doing so. However, if you want to install it with proxies, it's getting even more complicated. And in this video, we'll do a full run of the complete installation of Azure Stack HCI with a proxy in between. Okay, so let's maybe talk a little bit about the environment that I have and lose some words on how I got there. So first of all, my environment looks like this. So I do have two nodes which have a couple of adapters. Then I do have a proxy server at this stage, which is also acting as the default gateway and the firewall. And then I do have some, domain controller that lives on the network itself. And then another upstream DNS server for name resolution. So what we need to do is, to configure the adapters. These ones here at the bottom will be configured during the installation of Azure Stack HCI, right? So there will be adapters that are used for the storage traffic, which are the SMB adapters, and there will be adapters that should be used by virtual machines later on that are going to be hosted on Azure Stack HCI. But for the proxy setup, I need to configure the management adapters here. And they will talk over over the proxy server to reach out basically to the internet. And that's the caveat of this configuration, right? So there are some steps to do, and that's what's to be done in this video. Okay, how did I get there? Well, I'm using a virtualized environment, so I'm not doing this on real hardware. I'm doing this in virtual machines. And I was using my PowerShell code repository for creating Azure Stack HCI VMs running on top of Hyper-V, right? So with virtualization, there is the possibility, or with Hyper-V, there is the possibility to have something like a nested environment, which is I can run other hypervisors as virtual machine on top of Hyper-V, right? This is good for simulation, and I was using that repository for simulating this. Okay, so let's go and have a look at the solution, right? So there is basically my Hyper-V server, and here are my two HCI nodes that we will take care of in just a minute. Then I do have a domain controller. Here's my firewall and my my proxy server, and there is an upstream DNS server living on another host, which is that guy here, right? Okay, so going back to the configuration, let's first have a look at the nodes itself. Okay. Okay, so this is the first node. So let's change to the PowerShell, and I want to demonstrate that our web is not working at the moment by trying to reach out to www.microsoft.com and see if that works. That shouldn't come back with a response. And as you could see here, this would time out or don't return with something. Okay. Now we need to do the proxy settings, right? Because Azure Stack HCI needs to talk to Azure, and we need to download some stuff also before the installation itself. So internet needs to be working, and if you look up the official documentation, there are code snippets for configuring the proxy settings. code samples for doing that. However, the difficulty is already starting with that guy here, because that commandlet would not be available on a new installed system, right? So this command itself is already something that you need to download from the internet, right? So there's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, as you need that WinINet proxy module. And basically what you can do is you can copy and paste it and provide it or upload it in some way to your physical node. And that's basically what I did. So under the C drive, under temp, there should be the WinINet proxy PSM. So if I do a notepad here, let's do that and look at the WinINet proxy. You could see that I was, putting that code into that file here on that system, right? So, before doing this, trying to launch a help command on the WinINet proxy command, I would not be able to get something back probably. Let's see if that would work. Right, doesn't work, but after import module WinINet proxy, running the same command, you see that I get now a help or an indication on how to use that commandlet. Okay, so that's the first step that you need to do. Next thing is to come up with the right proxy configuration. There are some things that you want to include in the proxy, some things that you want to exclude, and that's the difficulty, because some of these commands are difficult to assemble. There are some there's a slight variation in syntax for every command. So let's come up with a script that does that, and maybe I'll copy and paste it here, or scribble this one here. So or just move it over. Okay, that's maybe not ideal from the view perspective, right? Let's enlarge this a little bit. Okay, so that should do it. So basically the first thing that you need to do is you need to type in the proxy, the path to the proxy, which is in my system, the 1.254, right? This is also the default gateway. So now let's maybe do an ipconfig first to see where we are going. I do have a couple of adapters, compute2, SMB2, compute1, SMB1, but all of these ones are not configured, right? So you could see it from the IP address space. They are using APIPA addresses. The only one that is configured is the A management one, which has an IP address, either the 2 or the 3, depending on which node that I am, and it's containing a default gateway pointing to the firewall. However, the firewall is not open, right? As you could have seen for the web request that we did, it went into the black hole. Okay, so let's go back to the script. No, not this one. It was that code line here, right? Which is, okay, the proxy configuration. Next thing is you need to come up with a bypass list, right? So these ones are, don't change them, keep them, because they are sort of well known for the HCI installation procedure. The next stuff is something that you need to change, depending, because this is the node names, meaning the Hyper-V or the HCI hosts that you want to add, right? So these are my two nodes, 1 and 2. Then I'll add the name of the cluster and the individual IP addresses of every node. After that comes the domain with a wildcard. And then I do have something which is, the IP address of the range that I will specify when installing Azure Stack HCI, right? So remember, when you have done an Azure Stack HCI installation, you go to the Azure portal, you fill out some forms, and it will ask you for an IP address range that you will dedicate to Azure Stack HCI for using it for certain workloads, right? And I will use that range. And the first IP address out of this range will be the cluster IP. And the second one will be the Azure Resource Bridge VM that lives on top of this cluster, which performs or gives you the opportunity to install or to create virtual machines on HCI from the Azure portal. And we need to exclude that IP address. So excluding individual IP addresses may sound a little bit not so nice. So what it can do is you can work with wildcards here, right? So this bypass list is okay if you are entering a star here, right? So I'm excluding the whole range. Okay, which is fine as it is my management network. However, this will set the proxy and the bypass list, and then there is the section for another environment variables, which will be used by subsequent services that come on top during the Azure Stack HCI installation. And this also includes a no proxy bypass list. The caveat for this one is it uses a different syntax, or almost the same, but not quite, right? So, for example, the differences are here. You have a star at the domain here in the above section. You don't have the star notation here, right? Then you can use a star notation here for a range of IP addresses, but you need to do it in the CIDR notation here. You can't do it with a star notation here, right? That's the main differences in that notation, right? So let's take this, copy it and paste it onto my HCI nodes and see if that works then. Okay, let's just do it one more time. No, that was not it. No, that's the wrong script. Okay, let's copy that one more time. Go back, paste it. And now we do have the proxy settings, and now let's make sure that these will work, right, as a test, and go back to do the web request. And now you see get a response back from Microsoft.com. Okay, so this is how we want to have it on the other node as well. So let me do the same steps and on the other node and speed up the video a bit. Okay, now the second node has been prepared as well. And now we can, there's another thing that we need to do, which is a time server. But let's maybe just have a look first at the official documentation. So now, as we have done the proxy configuration, we can perform all the actions that are required for the Azure Stack HCI installation, right? So our system has been set up, but now it's time to do the regular Azure Stack HCI installation. So the first thing would be prepare the Active Directory. And that's, about downloading some specific tool and create a special organizational unit with the correct permissions for a installation user, right? So this is my AD, and maybe I'll put it a little bit larger here. So you could see here, this is just, a vanilla installation of a domain. Don't have any organizational units here, but I soon will. And in order to save some time, I already prepared a PowerShell script where I just need to enter a password, right? And it should be a complex one. Okay, otherwise Azure Stack HCI may complain about you not using a complex password. Okay, so this guy here will create the organizational unit. Before doing that, it will download the artifacts pre-creation tool from the PowerShell gallery. That's why I get this dialog now. And after that, it will create the organizational unit with the parameter that I've specified. So the organizational unit will be called HCI, and there will be a user created as LCM user, which will be the domain user that can carry out the installation of Azure Stack HCI. Right. So this, do a refresh on the domain itself. And you could see here now I do have that organizational unit and that user account. And this user account has specific permissions on the organizational unit, which you should be able to see at the bottom. Here it is, right? And it has some special permissions on this organizational unit. Okay, so don't want to go into details here. You can do that for yourself. And try to find out, what has been said here in detail. Okay, good. So AD prep has been done. Now for the next step, which is downloading the software, which is the Azure Stack HCI operating system, and you would download that from the Azure portal, right? So there are screenshots on how to do that, and what you get is an ISO file, for example, that you can bring on top of your either virtual nodes, as like in my demo environment, or on physical nodes, right? Then you would install the operating system. Basically, you don't really do that much. You just give it the correct names. What you will do is you set up the networks so that you have only one network adapter configured. Make sure that you have a default gateway assigned to one adapter only, and the other ones can leave unconfigured sort of, right? There's another thing that you need to check, which is, and that this is especially important if it comes to the proxy installation, which is the time server, right? So make sure that you have a valid time source, right? That you can ask for the correct time. Okay, so in my case, I will configure a time server that is well or better suited for my geography. So now let's maybe have a look here, which is a server which is based in Germany. Okay, so switch over to the nodes, node number 1. And now let's check if that worked. Okay. I'm constantly going out to the wrong Visual Studio Code window. So let's just, check if that will work. And as I see responses getting back from that IP address using the NTP protocol 123, or the port, the NTP port, that looks fine. Right, so make sure that your firewall allows that and that this is working. Okay, otherwise your Azure Stack HCI installation may fail at a point and you need to redo all of that stuff. Okay, now let's do the same thing on the other node. Right, so that was easy. Now let's do the sample one more time to test it if that worked as well. Okay, looks good. Yes, any additions to that? Let me think. Yeah, it might be good. If you're not, yes, let's validate for the installation of Hyper-V. Right, so if that has been installed, let's do that on the other node as well. And there is one more thing that I would do on that system, which is disabling IPv6, right? Because currently you could see that I do have unconfigured IPv6 addresses from that network. In order not to confuse the cluster, I could either, configure it appropriately or, remove IPv6, and that's what I do. So let me just, copy the code snippet from my repository here and disable IPv6. No, that's the, come on, copy it, run it. And you could see here that IPv6 addresses now are gone on every adapter, right? So let's do the same stuff on this node as well, on the other node. And by the way, the installation of Hyper-V was successful. It was already done, so I didn't need a reboot of that system. Okay, so Hyper-V is there, IPv6 is there, time server is valid, proxy servers have been set. Okay, check. Next thing would be register with Arc and set up the permissions. So yeah, this is some steps that you need to do. So for registering your individual Azure Stack HCI nodes with your Azure subscription, you need to download some code, right? That's as it would be on a normal system, right? But for a proxy setup, you probably, yes, or you absolutely need to download the resources from the internet first. So what I am doing is, yeah, let me just, grab this code here. It is a little bit more than this, to be honest, not really much. But the only difference that I have is the code line here is a little bit more selective, as I would say, right? So you could see here that the required version for the Arc installer is, I'm specifying a previous version, right? There is a later one which you should be using if you are going for the official hardware install. The reason why I am using this other version or the previous version is that I'm doing it in a nested environment, and I want to avoid some checks which would or have caused problems in the past, right? So that's the only reason why I'm doing this, but that's specific to my installation, right? So let's do that. Right, and I think I'm good to go with that code piece here. So let's start to do that. Oh, come on. You can do it. And with the proxy settings correct, it should download the stuff correctly. So probably the previous command was already run. So now let's accept all of these and do the same. Azure Stack HCI installer. No, there was a typo. Let's take that one as well. Just do the copy one more time and do the same steps on the other node. Okay. So now I do have the software, the required software installed. However, I would now need to do the actual initialization or Arc registration using the proxy settings, right? So if I am using the proxy, I need to explicitly specify it in my script. So, and here's, the other script portion of it, right, which is that code section here. So I entered my subscription, I'm using my tenant ID, and I'm entering my resource group, and my region should be West Europe, right? I don't really need the try catch block So let's just remove that to make it a little bit simpler. What happens is I will log on using that information about the tenant ID. After a successful logon using device auth, I'll get the token and then pass it on to the invoke command here at the bottom, right? The important piece is the proxy settings need to be specified here as well. So make sure that you have entered here the correct proxy in this one, right? There is one more thing to do, as I believe that I don't have the resource group nested right now. So let's create one, as it is not there. No. And it should be Invest Europe. Okay. Make sure that you select a resource location that is able to take Azure Stack HCI Azure Stack HCI artifacts. Okay, not every geo is supporting Azure Stack HCI at the moment. Okay, my nested, is that it? My nested. Okay, let's take that one and do the initialization. So maybe let's clear the screen first, put it in here, and do the device auth. In the meantime, I'll prepare the www.device login screen. Okay, there you go. A little bit unfortunate line break here, so let's try to do that. Take the user and see if that works. Okay, now copy and paste the code to the other node as well, because it has to be done on both nodes. Whereas the other one is also working and downloading the environment checker components for the subsequent validation. Okay, so let's go back to the script. So we did the arc setup and the registration. Now there is one thing that we need to do. We need to assign the required permissions for the deployment. And that are permissions that you would probably set at the resource group level, right? So that means for the one that is installing Azure Stack HCI, the person needs to have the correct permissions on the resource group level at minimum. So that's why I'm going here at the access control, and I'm probably switching a little bit or trying to snap the windows here so that I can see what I'm doing, right? And I need to be Azure Stack HCI administrator on that resource group. There we are with the group or with the role, and I'm selecting be frank as user for that resource group. I omit the reader because I am administrator or global admin on the subscription itself, right? So as an owner of the subscription, I do have reader permissions already automatically, so I don't need to specify these ones explicitly, right? However, I would need to specify the key vault roles explicitly, because even as an owner, you're not allowed to, look up key vault secrets, for example. You need to have that rules explicitly, or that roles explicitly. Okay, so let's take the key vault data admin, right? No, that was not it. Let's copy it. One more time, key vault administrator, data access administrator. Next members would be frank There you go. Review and assign. Looks good. Now let's do that for the remaining roles. Okay, so that should be it from a permissions perspective. And now the next thing would be the deployment method. And I'm selecting the deployment using the Azure portal. Okay, I'm not doing the ARM template. At this stage, I will do the UI way of doing it. Okay. However, there is one more thing that we need to do, or let's check if the registration has been working. So now let's move that back again and have a view here for the full picture. Come on, you can do it. Okay, so I can see now my registration has taken place as I see my 2 nodes lighting up in my resource group. But there are some things that will happen in the meantime, right? For example, you could see it at the on the screens that some extensions will be installed, right? And we need to wait for these extensions to be installed successfully, right? You can either go to the console and check for this, or you can select the individual node in the Azure portal, go to extensions, and then see these extensions being added, right? And this is where we need to wait for these the extensions to all display succeeded. Okay, so I will pause the video here, and we'll continue when we are ready with that. Okay, so after a while, and that can take up a couple of minutes depending on the speed of your system and the internet connectivity, this is how it should look like. All of the extensions, all of the 4 extensions that we require are listed as succeeded, and now we can continue with the next step. So go back to your Azure Arc view and select Azure Stack HCI, and then select the Deploy Cluster button. And I will choose the right group. My cluster name will be, and I take that from the proxy config, right? Or copy and paste it there so to be consistent. Then I would create the key vault. So let's press create new key vault. That looks good. Now I select my 2 nodes, click on validate selected service. Yes, and hopefully they show up in green. Otherwise, you probably will get an indication of what's wrong on your system. Maybe your extensions have not been loaded successfully yet, or you need to specify, for example, a default gateway, or you have maybe specified too many default gateways. But it should tell you at this section. Mine is working good. So what I'll do now is, rather than doing a new configuration, I am referring to a template, an ARM template that I was saving out before as a template specification. And what it does is it helps me to save some time, as I don't need to type in everything, but I will still go through the settings in that wizard, right? I don't fire it off. I'll just have that pre-configured if you wish. Okay, so looking back at my diagram here, right, you remember that I'm not using a virtual switch for storage, right? That's what I'm not doing. And I'm running the custom configuration. That means I will have a specific virtual switch for compute and a specific switch for my management network, right? So that's basically what I will do. And for the management one, I'll take that network adapter. And just to make sure, for the settings, RDMA is disabled. I'm not playing with the jumbo frames here on that. These ones are sort of, kept to the defaults or disabled RDMA. I also disabled RDMA for my compute network. I also, did not set the jumbo frames here. And for the storage network, I also did disable RDMA. Why? This is only in my demo environment, right? On a normal case, you would enable RDMA for best performance, and you probably also would take the defaults on the jumbo frames, right? But make sure that you have then a consistent setting. Not only setting them here would be enough. You would need to check your switches as well, where the systems are connected to, that the settings are correct there. Okay, but for my demo environment, this is abstracted, or I don't need to do it. Okay, next, the IP address ranges that I'm going to use. All right, so I told you that we need to specify a range of at least 6 IP addresses. I give the system a little bit more than these. All of my network settings are still correct. This is my default gateway, which is also the firewall, and my DNS server is the domain controller. So that looks good. Next, now specify a location name. So that will be the drop-down box for the users when they want to create a virtual machine, that they know on which system or on which HCI node that will go. So then we need a cloud witness, meaning a storage account for the referee or the gatekeeper, if you wish, for the cluster. So if one cluster node goes down, the system that can reach out to the cluster witness still has then the majority of votes and would take over the workload. Then I do specify my AD information, and also I need to specify the users, LCM user. So remember the user that was created in the Active Directory for installing Azure Stack HCI. Let me Okay, and then there was a local admin that I created before on these systems. So get local user. You could see that I created a local administrator account on these systems. So I'm not using the local administrator. I'm using an account that is in that local administrators group. That's done for any actions that need to be performed before Azure Stack HCI is joined to the domain. Okay. Okay, be careful with the passwords here. Mistypes can lead to, wait times, and you may need to redo that stuff again. Usually I would go for the recommended settings, right? But in my demo environment, I want to save time, and maybe, not everything is supported in a virtualized environment. Hence, I disable the security settings, or I use these custom security settings, okay? But that's just for demo and for a virtualized environment. The next thing is, do I want to create the volumes for where the virtual machines can also go? And I say yes. I don't want to create them individually afterwards. I mean, you could, but I want to save time. I'm not tagging, I'm hitting the validation button, and next will be validation that will be kicked off. And we need to wait for the results at this stage. Okay, so that looks good. Next will be the full validation. And that can take up some minutes. So what you can do in that time frame is to navigate on the first node in alphabetical order. You should see a cloud deployment /logs folder. Let's see, cdc. And that folder should contain a script, that has the output from the validation. So once you have hit the validation, wait for some seconds and then have a look at the environment validator log. So get content environment validator, and then wait for the PowerShell to be there. And what you can do here is to watch for the progress a little bit more in detail, which is especially good if you need to troubleshoot at some point in time, and you see what happens. Okay, so if you're hitting any issues, any errors, that log should help you, or it helped me a lot, or very often, to hunt down any problems during installation. Okay, so let's wait there. Okay, so this looked good. Now when the environment validator is completed, that's a good sign. And in the Azure portal, all is green. So that means we can proceed with the installation, and that's what I'll do. So let's kick it off. And now we need to wait for the installation to take place. I will do refreshes of this view and speed up the video quite a bit so that we can save some time here. Okay, so now after some time, the installation completed, and your cluster should look like similar to this, and we are ready to do additional steps like getting virtual machines on top of it. You will find the resources on my GitHub repository. Here you see the key or the link to it. And there are some other useful resources there. For example, an Excel sheet with the deployment steps and the correct timing in there as well. So you would be able to see at which time what was done during the installation. I added the Squid proxy log to it, so the timelines should match. And I also, part of this is a filtered URL list that you could use to feed your firewall with, or at least to have it as a reference. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.